Hi everyone, Jill Mathis here, and welcome to another one of my web courses for Photography Concentrate. Today's topic is on photography competitions, and there sure are a lot of those around. I'm going to touch on some pros, and I'll be touching on some cons too, and hopefully give you a good basis to make your own educated decision on whether you want to enter a contest, or even start doing it as part of a routine. I personally know one photographer who has put entering contest as part of a pretty solid business plan. In doing the research for this course, I read quite a few articles too written by photographers who do the same thing. So contest could be a one-time thing for you, or it might be something to think about incorporating into an organized program for yourself. You know, contests can be a lot of fun. And there are lots of reasons why I think it can be a good idea to participate, but they aren't for everyone. I think that contests are especially useful once you've reached a certain skill level and you're sort of wondering what's next. One of the most important things to remember, though, is don't be a slave to the opinions of others. If you plan on entering photography contests, you have to realize the inherent biases of the judges and the system. Regardless, always shoot for yourself, using yourself as the most important audience. And remember, a lot of times a competition is sort of based on a whole lot of luck. I've judged numerous competitions, and I can say from experience that even the most impartial judge is still a human judge. For example, most of the judges I've sat with all take their responsibility very seriously and jump right in with a lot of enthusiasm. But the sad reality is that the work that's judged earlier on in the day sometimes has a lot more attention than the work that's judged later. After seeing 1,000 photos, visual fatigue eventually kicks in and oftentimes works against the later participants. At the end of the day, no matter how hard you try, it sometimes can be hard to work up the same level of attention that you had during those first few hundred photos. And another problem, especially in the smaller local contests, the judges oftentimes know the photographers. It's not a court of law, so it's hard to make 100% sure that there doesn't exist some type of bias. In the same vein, one of the last contests I judged was to raise awareness and money for an autism foundation. One of the participants was a young man with autism, and there was a plea from the foundation to award him at least a special mention. This actually happens more often than I care to admit. And then there's also the personal taste of the judges, which at a subconscious level can work against or for you. If you have a judge, for example, who personally prefers black and white photography over color, then there is that risk that your color image, no matter how great it is, might not resonate with them that much. Now, enough of playing the devil's advocate here. I feel I had to mention some of these things so you can make your own informed decisions. I'll be going over a few more tips at the end of this video and give you some helpful links. But in the meantime, one of the best sites I found to help you find some amazing contests is photocrowd.com. So definitely make note of this site and refer to it when you start on your new adventure. So let's talk about some solid reasons why entering contests could be a great step towards strengthening your photography, your business, and even your day-to-day life in general. Keeping in mind all that we talked about so far. Remember, it's important to shoot for yourself, and over time and with practice, you become your best critic. But I know that sometimes, in the beginning especially, it might be hard to find some honest, clear feedback. Your best friend or your wife might not be the most objective of viewers. So one good reason to enter a contest is when you feel the need for some frank opinions. Even if the contest is an online one and all the feedback is strictly in the post, these posts are from a dedicated photography-related site and are comments from photographers or at least from people with some degree of experience and visual vocabulary. They're not some passive-aggressive post on your Facebook page from a random friend. In theory, this is what Photography Concentrate offers in the Facebook group. You're getting feedback from people who are serious about photography and have, at the very minimum, a solid working relationship with photographs. One of the advantages of having studied photography in college is having all those years of constant and varied discourse and open discussion on every single photo I took. It's something I think a lot of photographers, once they're out there working, sort of miss more than anything else. So, if you're ready to start listening and growing, entering a photography competition is definitely a good option. Besides wanting and needing feedback on your work, another motive to throw your hat into the ring is that contests are a good way to improve your photography by stepping out of your comfort zone. Contests will challenge you, especially those that have a theme that might be new to you or outside of your usual style, such as a landscape-oriented photographer who takes on a portrait challenge. Most contests have themes that revolve around a specific color or an emotion or a specific genre. And most are pretty simple ideas, but sometimes they're the ones that we might not have come up with by ourselves. And these are the ones that spark new ideas and give you that burst of inspiration. Putting yourself in a position to overcome creative obstacles will shape you into a stronger photographer, which, when you think about it, then can give you the right encouragement to confront even obstacles in your everyday life. You'll also start to see if your photos are different from the ordinary by having them placed side by side with others working in the same vein. You'll start to compare your work to your contemporaries and set a higher work standard for yourself. Sometimes what you thought was a novel idea for a photo becomes kind of banal when you see that everyone else had the same idea. But that's where the growth starts. You begin to learn to not settle for that first thought, but to analyze where it came from and be patient enough to see where it can take you. Also, another area that many people feel is outside what is comfortable for them and which makes so many very nervous is talking, or in the case of contests, writing about themselves and their work. The more serious competitions usually ask for an artist statement, and some even can get pretty elaborate with questions such as, where do you see your art going, and what inspired you in the work you submitted, or what moved you to become a photographer. These can be first-time questions for a lot of folks, and first-time self-analysis too. But these are questions you, at some point, need to ask yourself if you want to grow and be taken seriously. So far, we've talked about a couple of rather intangible reasons to enter a photo competition: getting objective feedback, learning how to compare and analyze your work, and getting yourself out of your comfort zone. Now, let's talk about a couple of more hands-on reasons. One way that I think contests are beneficial is in the way that they force you to edit down your portfolio and choose your best work. Most contests have a limit to what you can submit, and you have to choose only between 3 and 5 of your photos. When you have an entire project or series of images, you usually are used to showing the entire series, whether it's a series of 10 or 50 images. The severe limit that is usually set in contests will give you a great opportunity to really sit down and evaluate your work. It'll also get you out to start shooting more if you find you need other types of work to round out your submission. As a photographer, knowing your work is being criticized and judged by others, you force yourself to give a critical eye to your own work to achieve the best possible result. Now, this takes some practice, but by continually participating, you really start to hone your inner critic. By being forced to choose, it will make you take a step back and really see the photos you've taken, which is the first step to becoming your most harsh, but your best and most honest critic. This is a very important part of being a better photographer. Some of the most interesting and beneficial competitions are those that have an exhibition linked to them. Sometimes these are a photographer's first experience of seeing their work on a wall, whether you've been shooting for years or have just begun. This opportunity can create such a sense of accomplishment and satisfaction that goes way beyond whether you win or lose. And going back to the subject of portfolios, if you start entering contests on a regular basis, which from a networking standpoint is actually a very good idea, having and maintaining an up-to-date portfolio will make the entry process so much faster. And vice versa, entering contests often gives you another reason to keep adding regularly to your current site, which, as we all know, can be one of those chores we are constantly procrastinating. So, if you're looking for more tangible motives to take the leap into competing, here's what we just covered. You start to learn how to edit down your work, which is the one skill most people don't spend time getting right, and one of the biggest things holding photographers back in general. Contests make you get out and shoot more. And contests are oftentimes super opportunities to start or continue exhibiting work. And finally, they usually get you to update and keep your personal site current. Now let's just talk a minute here about contest and networking. In the smaller regional and local competitions, the opportunity to get out and meet like-minded people is a real bonus. Not only will you meet other photographers, but also just other people, maybe even collectors or clients who are just interested in photography in general. This is especially valid when there is an exhibition connected to the contest. For the larger national competitions, from the point of view of SEO, search engine optimization, an associated website, think Sony Awards, with a high Google ranking, will generate quality visits to your site because each click is worth more than clicks from sites with a lower page rank. And regardless if the contest is local or international, if you win or place, this can be a great marketing tool to put on your website or email as an announcement. Even if someone has never heard of the competition in which you placed, the mere fact that you won gives you a tad more shine in their eyes. And last but not necessarily least is the possibility of actually winning some prize money or material prizes like cameras, etc. I host and judge an annual local competition at a yacht club to benefit different charities, and while it's a fun event more than anything else, we always try to have some great prizes. In 2015, which was our second year, a young guy won the first prize, which was a Pro Nikon. Now, I don't remember which one. And all the judges were unanimous on choosing him as the first prize winner, but we didn't know anything about him or his background. Well, come to find out, he couldn't afford a good camera, but he'd been trying really hard to save up enough money for one because all he wanted to be was a photographer. He is now a very well-known wedding photographer and works constantly. He still sends me a note from time to time thanking me. So sometimes these things can actually be life-changing. So let's talk about some ways that you can up your chances of winning. Now, this may seem like a no-brainer, but even if you have the most amazing photo ever taken, if you don't follow the guidelines and the rules set up by the contest, it won't even make it to the judge's desk. I just had a look at the Sony Awards rules. There are around 14 rules, and some of those have up to 15 amendments. Besides the usual guidelines, there are more obvious ones such as images should be no smaller than 1 megabyte and no larger than 5. It's also stated that the images should be JPEG files and must be saved in the sRGB color model. And I know that some people's default color model is the CMYK, like mine, which automatically makes that photo ineligible if they forget to change it. Be aware also that most contests want photos from that year or within a short time frame. Now that can be frustrating too if you have the perfect photo for a themed competition, but you took it 3 years ago on your vacation to Spain. And these larger global competitions are getting very meticulous about copyrights and intellectual property rights of a third party, along with trademarks owned by a third party. This could get tricky if you're photographing outside and there are advertisements. Think about photography in a place like Times Square. So do your homework before you even start looking in your archives or get out to take photos. Know what the contest organizer is all about. The Audubon Photography Awards is, well, obviously dedicated to birds. But Leica's Oscar Barnack Award, for example, is less clear. So take the time to look into the site and get a feel for what their competition is all about. And a good way to do this is to look at past submissions and past winners. See if you can find a link between all those winners and runner-ups. And while you're at it, check and see if the judges are named and do a little bit of research on them too. Figuring out what some of them like and who they are can give you that little advantage you need to put you right at the top. So remember, be meticulous in reading all the guidelines and all the rules. Do as much research as you can on the organization, the past winners, and the judges. Give yourself every possible advantage. Let's talk about the images you're going to submit. While you will more than likely have a theme to follow, though there are open competitions without one, try and think outside the box. If you're entering a landscape competition, for instance, and you've seen the past participants all submit sunrise or sunset images, think outside of that and try some nighttime landscapes. A rule I follow when I'm editing my own work is to ask myself, is there a bit of mystery in a photo? Does the photo make the viewer ask questions? Having a bit of mystery or creating a sense of wonderment makes the viewer curious, and we all know what happens when we're intrigued by something or curious about a subject. It makes it stick in your mind, which is what you want when you have a judge looking at hundreds and sometimes thousands of photos. And another tip that should seem self-evident is only submit technically perfect images. If you've got a really super capture, but you're wondering to yourself if it may be just a tad soft, well, it probably is. And as painful as it may be, you're going to have to skip it. Accordingly, don't try and make it sharp in Photoshop, and be very selective in your manipulation constraints. Judges know when things are being faked or fudged to cover up technical problems, and will definitely knock off points from your entry. And while we're on the subject of post-production, be aware that some competitions are directed toward a very digital art approach, and so anything goes, while others allow minimal modifications and some none at all. I often see, especially with photographers still trying to find their style, so many cases where the photographer gets sort of carried away with the magic of Photoshop. In contests not asking for enhanced images, make sure that the visual impact created digitally doesn't overpower the subject matter to the extent that the technique becomes the first thing that is noticed as opposed to the subject. All you need to do to understand that photography competitions have become a big business is to just simply Google photo competitions. That little exercise right there might put you off going any further, but don't get discouraged. I'm going to give you some things to be aware of and look out for that will help you narrow down which competitions are for you and some traits of the ones that can be a bit dodgy. As with any company out there, whether it's an oil change business or an architectural firm, it's good to have a look at how long they've been around. Needless to say, you shouldn't completely X off the ones that are new, but big or small, read very carefully what are your rights and what are their rules. For instance, be especially aware of a competition that asks for copyrights or even a shared copyright. You don't ever want to give up your rights to an image when you're participating in a competition, even partially. Most organizers who are going to be doing a lot of publicity, which of course is a good thing, will need to use your photos for things like social media, on their website, in books or catalogs. So you definitely want to be a part of any PR they do, but it's important that the rights are clearly defined. You will need to make sure that you are seeing the words non-exclusive license somewhere within the guidelines and entry application. A non-exclusive license gives the organization the right to use your image on whatever platform is specified. Make sure that the where and when and the length of the license is clear, but you are the sole holder of the rights. Most organizations will probably want something like 2 years. That way they can use your image during the year of the competition and hypothetically to advertise for future contests. I just mentioned about having a look at how long an organization has been around before entering. Well, I ran across this while doing some research for this video. The Smithsonian Photo Contest. Now, you can't get any older or more respected than the Smithsonian. But the thing that took me completely by surprise was that when I read the fine print, it stated that just by entering, not winning, you gave them a royalty-free, meaning you don't get any payment, worldwide perpetual license to display, distribute, reproduce, and create derivative works of all entries. And they will not have to seek additional approval in connection with such uses. Now, that's some pretty serious stuff right there. So the takeaway here is that the most important thing is to read everything very carefully. And the last but not least thing to consider are the entrance fees, or lack thereof. In theory, entry fees are usually used to provide upfront money to the organization for things such as creating the catalog or to cover basic expenses if there's a show involved. Many times, well-known critics charge fees to judge. However, George Koch, former president of Artist Equity in America, which is a nonprofit foundation that supports artists, complained that the money a lot of these show sponsors are raising is far more than needed to meet their expenses. They actually stipulate in their guidelines that artists should not participate in events that ask an entrance fee. Now, they're talking here more about things like juried shows, where the most you'll get is a chance to show your work, but there is an overlap with contests. Sometimes you'll see an entrance fee for as small as $5 or $10, and other times it might be far more. Here too, it's important to carefully research exactly where the money is going before committing to a photography contest with a steep entrance fee. Is it a cleverly disguised income for a private gallery, or is the money going to fund a public cultural center? If you're finding it really difficult to figure out where the money is going, then it might be a red flag. It's also important to consider the fee in relation to the prestige of the organization and what, if anything, you get out of participating. If there's a show for all participants, or your work will be shown online even, then, well, maybe an entrance fee might be worth it if you think you have a good shot at winning. Here too, read carefully about who pays for shipping and framing in a traditional exhibition. These costs can be prohibitive, especially if the exhibition space is far from you. Now, just be aware and wary. Even if they are offering a lot of exposure, this doesn't really equate to a lot of paid work. To answer the question of to pay or not to pay, well, it all boils down to personal preference. Competitions can be just plain good fun, and if you approach it like that, then a nominal fee is a small price. You can end up with some good experience under your belt and get some great feedback. Just do your homework, get organized, and evaluate your work and the contest without rose-colored glasses on. Now, for those of you ready to take the plunge, I've done a little research on what's out there. Besides the site, photocrowd.com, that I mentioned earlier, I found that photocontestguru.com has a great list of competitions out there for 2020. The site has links to huge ones like the Sony World Awards and the World Press Photo Contest, to competitions based on a wide range of topics, from landscapes to human rights, to wildlife to sports. I even saw cricket and rugby in there, to ones with sort of strange titles like the banality of evil in our daily lives. And there's even a listing for one that's a calendar contest. Of the 60-some contests I saw listed, I saw about 30 that were free, and the rest ranged from a price of $1 to $50. Now, another good site I found was Photo Contest 2020. This one had pretty much all that was in the Photo Contest Guru site, but with quite a few new ones too. But what I found distinctive was the listings not for competitions, but for open calls to show your work online for free. Now, I didn't read the guidelines closely or even look too carefully at their sites, but it's definitely something to look into. I hope, as always, I gave you guys some food for thought. If you want to chat about this or anything else, you can always find me on Facebook in the Mastermind group, so just drop me a line.